The female CEO thought the single dad was blind, then spent everything to help him see again. The rain hammered against the glass walls of the luxury office tower as Emma Lawson stood frozen beside her window, staring at the man sitting alone on a bench across the street. He looked exhausted. His worn jacket was soaked from the storm, and a little girl sat beside him, carefully holding an umbrella over his head while allowing herself to get drenched. The man never moved. He never looked up. He never reacted to the flashing lights of passing cars or the crowds rushing around him. From 40 floors above, Emma reached a conclusion that would change both of their lives. She believed the man was blind. What she didn't know was that fate had prepared a lesson neither wealth nor power could buy. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can change lives and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone you care about, and subscribe to Moments Hub for more emotional stories that touch the heart. Emma Lawson was known across the city as the youngest female CEO to build a billion-dollar company from nothing. Newspapers called her brilliant. Business magazines called her unstoppable. Employees called her demanding. But very few people knew the truth behind the polished image and expensive suits. Success had come with a terrible cost. Years earlier, Emma had lost her father after a long illness. He had been the only person who loved her without conditions. Since his death, she had buried herself in work. Every achievement brought applause from the world, yet every night she returned to an empty penthouse that felt colder than any office. One evening after work, she noticed the same man and little girl again. They were sitting on the same bench. The little girl couldn't have been older than 7. She wore a faded pink coat and held a school backpack covered in hand-drawn stars. Despite their obvious struggles, she smiled constantly. She would read books aloud to her father, describe the people passing by, and tell him stories about her day. The father simply listened. Emma watched them for nearly an hour. The next day, she saw them again. Then the next. And the next. Soon, they became part of her daily routine. Curiosity slowly turned into concern. One afternoon, unable to ignore them any longer, Emma left her office and crossed the street. As she approached, she noticed details she had never seen from above. The man was younger than she expected, perhaps in his mid-30s. His face showed signs of exhaustion, but there was something remarkably calm about him. The little girl sat close beside him, her small hand resting on his arm. Emma introduced herself and carefully asked whether he needed assistance. The man smiled politely. His name was Daniel Carter. The little girl was his daughter, Lily. Emma expected him to ask for money, food, or help. Instead, he thanked her for her concern and said they were doing their best. His dignity surprised her. Most people became nervous when speaking to wealthy executives. Daniel didn't. His calm confidence unsettled her in a strange way. Over the following weeks, Emma found reasons to visit more often. She learned that Daniel was a single father. 3 years earlier, his wife had died in a car accident. The loss had shattered their world. Since then, Daniel had devoted every moment of his life to raising Lily. What fascinated Emma most was his optimism. Despite obvious hardships, Daniel never complained. He always spoke about Lily's future. He always smiled when discussing her dreams. Yet one mystery remained. Emma still believed he was blind. He often stared into the distance without reacting. Sometimes Lily guided him through crowded sidewalks. Other times she described everything around them as though he couldn't see it himself. One evening, Emma finally asked about his condition. Daniel hesitated. A shadow crossed his face. Then he revealed a painful truth. Several years earlier, an accident at a construction site had severely damaged his eyesight. Doctors warned that his vision would continue deteriorating unless he underwent a complicated surgery. The operation offered hope. But hope came with a price far beyond what Daniel could afford. Since then, his vision had become increasingly limited. Some days he could barely recognize faces. Other days he saw only blurred shapes and shadows. Emma felt something tighten inside her chest. For the first time in years, another person's pain mattered more than her next business deal. That night, she couldn't sleep. Images of Daniel and Lily filled her thoughts. She imagined Lily growing up while watching her father's world slowly disappear into darkness. She imagined Daniel pretending to stay strong while secretly fearing the future. The next morning, Emma made a decision. She contacted the country's leading eye specialists. She requested consultations. She gathered medical reports. She arranged appointments. And she promised herself she would help Daniel regain his sight. At first, Daniel refused. His pride wouldn't allow him to accept such an enormous gift. But Emma persisted. She explained that some opportunities appear only once in life. Eventually, Daniel agreed. The surgery was scheduled. For the first time in years, hope entered their lives. Lily could barely contain her excitement. She began making lists of all the things she wanted her father to see clearly again. Sunsets. Movies. Christmas lights. Her school drawings. And most importantly, her face. Every time she mentioned it, Daniel fought back tears. Meanwhile, Emma became deeply involved in their lives. She attended appointments. She drove them to specialists. She helped Lily with school projects. Slowly, the walls around her heart began to crack. For years, she had measured life through profits, investments, and market growth. Now she measured it through smiles. Through gratitude. Through moments that no amount of money could purchase. As surgery day approached, however, unexpected complications emerged. Doctors discovered additional damage. The procedure would be significantly more expensive than originally estimated. Even Emma was stunned by the cost. The treatment would require multiple surgeries, specialized rehabilitation, and months of recovery. Friends advised her to walk away. Board members questioned her judgment. Some investors criticized her openly. They argued that she was risking too much for a man she barely knew. But Emma couldn't forget the little girl protecting her father from the rain. She couldn't forget Daniel's quiet courage. And she couldn't ignore the feeling growing inside her heart. Without hesitation, she approved every expense. Millions disappeared. Projects were delayed. Assets were sold. Yet Emma never looked back. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't investing in a company. She was investing in a human life. Months passed. The surgeries began. The recovery was painful. Progress was slow. Some days brought encouraging results. Others brought devastating setbacks. There were moments when doctors feared the treatment had failed completely. Those were the darkest days. Lily cried herself to sleep. Daniel blamed himself for accepting help. Emma questioned whether she had given everyone false hope. Yet none of them gave up. They continued moving forward one day at a time. Then came the morning that changed everything. The bandages were finally removed. Silence filled the examination room. Daniel blinked repeatedly. His hands trembled. The doctors waited. Emma held her breath. Lily squeezed her father's arm. And then Daniel began to cry. Not because he was losing his vision. But because he could finally see. Clearly. For the first time in years. The first thing he saw was Lily's face. Every detail. Every smile. Every tear. Every expression he had feared he might never witness again. The little girl threw her arms around him as both of them sobbed uncontrollably. Even the doctors struggled to hold back tears. Emma stood quietly in the corner, overwhelmed by emotion. In that moment, every dollar she had spent felt insignificant. Nothing compared to what she was witnessing. A father seeing his daughter again. A daughter seeing hope restored. And a broken heart discovering purpose. Before the ending, here's a special request. Comment below with the word hope if you believe one act of kindness can completely change someone's life. The months that followed brought even greater surprises. Daniel regained his independence. Lily flourished in school. Their lives transformed in ways they had never imagined. But the greatest transformation belonged to Emma. The woman who once measured success by wealth had finally discovered something far more valuable. Love. Purpose. Human connection. And eventually, the bond between Emma and Daniel grew into something neither had expected. What began as compassion became friendship. What became friendship slowly turned into love. Not because she saved him. Not because he needed her. But because they healed each other. Years later, whenever people asked Emma about the most important investment she ever made, they expected stories about billion-dollar companies. Instead, she would smile and think about a rainy afternoon, a little girl with an umbrella, and a single father who taught her that the richest people are not those who have the most money. They are those who give the most hope. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to Moments Hub for more emotional stories that remind us of the power of compassion and second chances. Because sometimes, the greatest miracle isn't restoring someone's sight. It's helping them see that they were never alone.